Hey everyone, I'm Dylan Mitchell, and this is the Rincon Horizons podcast. This show is about leadership, what it really takes to grow, to adapt, and to reach the summit over the course of your leadership journey. Our goal is simple: to help you lead better so your organization can climb higher. Each episode, I'm joined by my co-host and our main contributor, Todd Tuttle, managing partner of Rincon Aerospace. Todd, great to be back on with you.
Dylan, it is fantastic to be back on you. Episode number 5. I'm really excited. For people who may be joining us the first time, I'm the managing partner of Rincon Aerospace. We do executive level consulting to aerospace and defense companies. I've been in aerospace for about 3 decades. Seems like a long time. Spent most of my career developing flight control systems for aircraft or designing things that fly, leading teams that do that. I've held several roles in my career: chief engineer, director of engineering, vice president. But enough about me. Let's get to our guest. I know you're going to do a formal introduction, but I'm jazzed. I'm excited. We finally get to do the thing we promised on our very first episode. We said, this is just not going to be about aerospace. And if you listen to our first 4 episodes, they were a lot about aerospace, you know.
That's right.
Which is fine. But I'm pretty sure today we'll not focus on aerospace. It's going to be cool, exciting. We're going to talk about entrepreneurship. We're going to talk about other cool things.
I would be shocked if we touch aerospace.
I would too, but we've just done it. So we got to walk away from that. But I was thinking, we don't charge for this podcast. But I think if we did, today's podcast is going to be worth the price of admission. So without further ado, get on with our introduction, Dylan. I'm excited.
Well, like you said, Todd, and like we have said from the beginning, Rincon Horizons is that leadership podcast. And leadership doesn't just show up in high-performance flight teams or combat environments. It shows up in therapy rooms and small businesses, churches, and families. Today's conversation is about a different kind of pressure, the pressure that leaders put on themselves, because building something meaningful shouldn't cost you your health, your relationships, or your soul. Our guest today is Rebecca Hamlin. She's a licensed clinical social worker and founder of Soul Space. It's a wellness center in Tucson, Arizona, that's focused on integrated mental and physical health. Rebecca, welcome to Rincon Horizons. We're so glad you're here with us.
Thanks, guys. I'm really grateful for the opportunity.
Before we get into the leadership, do you want to give listeners context here? What is Soul Space? What problems does it solve? And what exactly is it that you've built?
As you mentioned, I'm the owner of Soul Space, an integrative holistic wellness center, and we're based right here in Tucson, Arizona. We launched in 2020, so sort of bad timing right before the pandemic and everything shut down. I spent several years working in the mental health field prior to that. And over time, I just started to recognize how limited traditional therapy is in addressing challenges people face. An example of this I always share is when I'm stressed, I may go to therapy, but I also may go for a hike or take a yoga class or grab coffee with a friend. All those things are great options and all meaningful and supportive in different ways. But as a therapist, what I realized is that I could only offer this one piece of what my clients needed. And that really pushed me to expand this vision of what mental health looks like and how we can serve our clients, and started to rethink what support looks like and how to build something integrative and comprehensive. There was a lot of things converging at the same time. I was reading a great book called The Body Keeps the Score. And I was learning how the body impacts the mind and the mind impacts the body. I was also working in Reno, Nevada at this residential eating disorder facility. It was this beautiful, integrative, holistic team. I was working with endocrinologists and primary care doctors and nutritionists and massage therapists. It was this multidisciplinary team, and I couldn't understand why something like that didn't exist in an outpatient center or an outpatient practice setting. And so a few years later, I decided to launch Soul Space, and I looked for something. I couldn't find it, so I decided to start it.
That's fantastic, Rebecca. You've done what I think a lot of people listening to this podcast and people producing this podcast, myself included, are trying to do. You've started a successful business. This is frankly one of these podcasts I just want to listen to if I wasn't moderating. But tell us about starting that business, deciding to work for yourself. I know you got a staff of, I think, more than 20 people now. And talk also about, as you grew, at what point did you realize you needed to let go of the day-to-day control and delegate leadership to other team members? How did you take that journey? I guess we'll give you points for starting in COVID and not going away. That's kind of incredible right there that your business could survive that. But how did you grow? How did your business grow? And how did you grow along with it?
I'll say this, entrepreneurship, I feel like it runs in my blood. If there's a gene for it, I probably have it. My grandpa owned his own business. My parents owned theirs. I think there's always been this instinct to build something new and different to meet a need that doesn't currently exist. I've noticed in my life there's this pattern of pioneering things that's always been consistent throughout my career. And I think for me, starting a business just felt like the most logical step. As I mentioned, I wanted to be part of a wellness practice, and I had this vision in my mind and I couldn't find it. And so I decided to create it. In terms of leadership, I've actually always been surrounded by incredible people who have helped me lead. I think from day one, I'm pretty deeply relational. That's a huge part of my career and my life. I think it's just more fun to build things with friends. So collaboration has actually been part of the process from day one. It really started that way. But I'd say this, about a year and a half ago, I hit a point where I felt pretty stretched pretty thin and a little burnt out. And I had a business coach at the time, and she really encouraged me to develop a leadership team. As we've grown, that team has grown. We have about 6 people on our leadership team right now. Making that shift where they lead different departments and they lead different teams has made a huge difference. They all have distinct roles, and now it feels like there's really a team to carry that vision with me.
You said something interesting I'd like to follow up on. You talked about working with friends. I struggle with that myself in the business. You know, that there's friendships, there's family, and there's business. Do you have any advice about that, about working with friends, about how to make that decision? Is it good enough just to work with a friend? How qualified does the friend need to be? Is there a time when it gets really uncomfortable with the friend? I'm not asking you to name names or anything, but kind of talk through that, because it sounds like you've worked through that in your business about working with friends and maybe family.
Those are great questions. Actually, so fun fact, my daughter works for me as well.
That sounds difficult. I don't know.
It's my favorite, but she's incredible. And I knew that hiring her, it was an easy decision. I do think it probably makes things a little bit more messy, I would say, for sure. It can. I have a really high bar for hiring and bringing people onto the team. I think regardless of whether they're a friend or a family member, that standard remains. I don't think I would change that standard to hire someone. That's really important. I also think she doesn't report to me. So I think that's important too, to have some structures where she has a different boss and she's accountable in the same ways that everybody else is, but to someone different than myself. But I've had a lot of luck, both with hiring friends and with my employees becoming friends. I know that's probably a bit of an unpopular opinion. Sometimes in leadership, we think we should keep our distance. But I think it's actually so much more fun to be relational and to have connection and community when you're building something like this.
I think in a follow-up question to that, how do you build guardrails into it? When do you have to take off the fun friend leader hat and put on the I have to make a hard decision leader hat?
That's a good question. I had one of my best friends worked for me for a long time, 5 years actually. She recently moved on. And I think in that process, that transition process, we had to have a lot of those questions like, can I just talk to you as a friend? Or can we just have a moment where we're talking about business? I do think communication, making sure those lines of communication are open, making sure I think it was important to hire people that would be honest with me as well, that there was really clear communication, that there was a healthy relationship in place. But I feel strongly that you can make it work, but you do have to have hard, honest conversations at times. It's certainly messy at times, but like my daughter I mentioned works for me. She has worked here for a year and a half, and she's just an incredible addition to the team. It can work. I think it's just making sure, like you said, Dylan, that there's some guardrails and boundaries and that there's different levels of leadership. That makes a big difference too, so that it's not just me.
Any other advice before we get off the entrepreneur topic for other people starting businesses, trying to be successful, about anything you can think of, marketing, advertising, leadership, anything under the sun?
I do think, and this is different because we do have a team of 20, but I think that leadership team has really shifted some things for me really significantly, where I can operate in this CEO visionary role, which is where I'm strongest. And I think most entrepreneurs fit in that box, where I can set direction and think strategically, where I can cast vision. That's really hard when you're stuck in the day-to-day weeds. Those leaders can take some of that support role and admin role where they're doing some of that detail work that I'm actually not very good at all, where I can stay in that CEO role, which I really appreciate. I think the other thing, I talk to people all the time, just sharing this yesterday with somebody, who want to start a business and they just overthink it. I think there is a healthy amount of impulsivity needed to start a business. I actually don't feel like I have any rare gifts or special talents. I think what sets me apart is I have a risk tolerance and that I'm a little bit impulsive and I will just try things and I'm not afraid to fail. We need to prepare, we need to think through things, but I just have seen overthinking kill a lot of good ideas. A lot of good ideas, a lot of good plans, a lot of good business opportunities. I think overthinking can kill that.
I know we're early in the podcast, Dylan, but that may be the title right there. Don't overthink it. I'm thinking that maybe that's true about titles too. Don't overthink it. That's a really good advice.
Rebecca, as Soul Space, as your organization has grown, culture kind of stopped being accidental and started being intentional, is what I would imagine. For leaders listening who are working on scaling teams, culture is either something you design or something that drifts. How important would you say culture and values at Soul Space are? And then practically, I guess, is kind of a follow-up question. How did you define them, protect them, and reinforce them as you added people onto the team?
It's a great question. I feel like it's really timely too, because for us, we've been doing that work since day one. Culture has been important. But in the last 6 months, we've doubled down on what this looks like. I've just been in the details of that right now, both myself and my leadership team. We've tried to be really intentional about how to grow in this area. We're in the mental health field. I think if we're going to talk about well-being with integrity, we have to live it, which means creating an environment where staff are taken care of, where people, not just productivity, but people are the priority. People can thrive. And just over the past year, I had to face the reality that there were some team members that weren't the right fit, weren't the right culture fit. They didn't align with our values. That created some important, necessary shifts. And at that point, we really started to double down how to get clear on our values. It wasn't a dramatic overhaul. We consolidated our values from 7 down to 4. We clarified them. We turned them into verbs, which I think is really important. That's an important thing that people miss sometimes with values, because the reason they need to be verbs is they need to have behaviors attached to them. You need to feel like it's really clear on what this looks like in practice. That was important for us to clarify what aligns. We wanted to know what behaviors align, what behaviors don't. We operationalize them across the entire organizations. We've embedded them in everything: staff meetings, annual reviews, hiring, promotions, bonuses, everything you can think of. They're not words on a poster or on the wall for us. It really is this lens that we use to make every decision. And I see as my role as the visionary and the CEO, I see my primary role as protecting those values, protecting the culture, taking care of my team members. I don't think there's anything more important in terms of my responsibility to take care of that.
I think listening to you talk, you mentioned previously, don't overthink it. And I think just even hearing you talk about vision and values and culture building, kind of consolidating down from 7 to 4, I think you said that right there, that in practice, you don't overthink it. And that's really good advice.
Rebecca, I'm guessing you've worked with several business leaders. We have lots of business leaders that listen to this podcast. And I think about business. I think about the struggles and things they're going through, maybe the damaged relationships that they create, because maybe they're really good at their business, but being so good at that has swung the pendulum so far to the direction of they've damaged relationships. They've damaged their physical and mental health. I'm guessing you've talked to a lot of people like that. So maybe a two-part question. Can you talk about some of the warning signs that leaders can look for when they're getting into that gray area of I've crossed the line, I'm hurting myself or my relationships? What should we look for? And then once we're there, how do we fix it? What do we do about it?
Great question. I love working with leaders. I've worked with a lot of people who feel burnt out and exhausted. And I wish that people were willing to do some work on the front end to create these guardrails and these boundaries ahead of time, because I think that would make a huge difference. It's not over, though. If you feel like you're in that space of being exhausted and burnt out, there's still some opportunities to intervene at that point. There's a lot that you can do, though, proactively for your mental health, your spiritual health, your physical health, so you don't get to that place. I think that's really important. When I was starting a business, a lot of people would tell me, that you have to work 60 hours a week. And I just have never really subscribed to that. I don't feel like it's healthy. I don't feel like it's going to make you the best leader that you can be. It's certainly not going to be good for your family and for your own soul. So I think setting some things up in place at the very beginning, probably if you're just starting out, that's a good place to start. If you do feel like you're in that place where you're exhausted and burnt out, I think some of the things that I encourage are having some real boundaries around availability. That's probably the biggest thing that I see is people feel compelled to be on all the time. And their team is contacting them all hours of the night, on the weekend. Slack, I think, is kind of terrible for people's health and mental health because they're just constantly on. Those kinds of things are real problematic. So figuring out some boundaries where we aren't checking our email constantly, where we're not always being texted, communicating those with your team so that they know what's the healthy times to connect to you or reach out to you, the right times to connect and reach out. I think learning to delegate, I was thinking about this just this morning, is that having a business is like having a baby. There's a lot of control and it's hard to give up control.
So maybe you would know. I don't know that Dylan and I would know that.
It's like having a kid, maybe I would say.
Okay,
not
having a kid, okay.
Necessarily, not having the baby, but having a kid in that I feel like I have 2 kids and then I have my business. I have 3 kids. And I do feel like that it's challenging to give up control. And I think that's where a lot of leaders get burnt out and exhausted is they don't want to give up control because they know that they're going to do it the right way. But you have to learn to hire people you trust, to delegate things, to let other people do things. I think that's really, really important. And then I think just creating some rhythms for faith. I think there are times that I don't get to the office till about 10 a.m. because I go to the gym in the morning. And that's really not ideal in some ways. It's a non-negotiable for me that I get that in. I probably could do it at 5 a.m., but who wants to do that? So
Who wants to do that?
yeah, exactly. Those are non-negotiables. I think Sabbath, I'm a big believer, whether you're a person of faith or not, that Sabbath is really important, having a day where you completely unplug. Some of those rhythms can make a huge difference and aren't huge changes, but would really make a significant difference if people are feeling like their health or their relationships are taking a hit.
That's all the time we have for this episode, but this conversation isn't anywhere close to being done. We're going to pause here, though, and we'll pick it up on the next episode. Huge thank you to Rebecca for joining us today. And Todd, as always, thank you so much. If you want to learn more about Rebecca and Soulspace, you can find her at soulspacetucson.com. Every episode of Rincon Horizons, we unpack the decisions and disciplines that shape us as leaders, at work, at home, and everywhere in between. Our goal is simple, to help you lead better so your organization can climb higher. If today's conversation challenged you, share it with someone who's carrying more than they should. You can find more about Rincon Aerospace or connect with Todd using the links in the show notes or at rincon.aero. That's rincon.aero. I'm Dylan Mitchell. You can learn more about my work at dm.supply. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on the Rincon Horizons podcast.